Welcome to the Criminal Imagination. This series, Crime and Civilization: How Crime Fiction Reflects the Rise and Crisis of the Modern State, begins with a simple question: what if the true purpose of law is not justice but control? Across centuries, crime fiction has recorded the political fears of its age, from cursed kings and cunning thieves to corrupt judges and silent witnesses. Each episode investigates how power operates through narrative, what it hides, what it condemns, and what happens when the system turns inwards and begins to devour itself. A woman is born in prison. Her mother, convicted, unnamed, is transported to the colonies. Her child, left behind, enters the world through the gates of confinement. She has no property, no name, no protection. Only her body, only her wits, and a relentless, unapologetic instinct for survival. That child becomes Moll Flanders. Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanders, first published in 1722, is many things: a picturesque novel, a moral tale, a social satire, a confession. But for us, it is also something else: a dossier in the archive of capitalist development. In this episode of Crime and Civilization, we turn to Karl Marx, to Capital, the Grundrisse, and his theory of historical materialism, to explore Moll not as a fallen woman but as an early economic subject whose life reveals the hidden structures of class, gender, and criminality in the rise of the modern state. This is not the story of a deviant. It is the story of a woman criminalized for surviving the world she was never meant to survive. Let us begin. Marx begins Capital not with the smooth operations of the factory, but with a history of violence. Primitive accumulation, the brutal pre-legal process by which people were stripped of their means of subsistence. Land enclosures in England, the privatization of the commons, the slave trade, colonial expansion, and crucially the gendered dispossession of women from communal protections and social authority. Moll is born into this historical moment. She is not a citizen. She is not a laborer in the legal sense. She is not even a wife. She is a bare life, a woman with no claim to property, inheritance, or lineage. In the terms of Marxist feminism, she is the first proletariat. In the Grundrisse, Marx described the birth of the capitalist relation as the creation of individuals free in their double sense: free to sell their labor and free of all means to survive without selling it. This is the condition of Moll Flanders. Her life is not outside capitalism. It is its test case, its first experiment. She will become a mother, a thief, a prostitute, a wife, a widow, a penitent, and finally a colonist. But in all these forms, one structure remains. Her body is capital. Her sexuality, her labor, her fertility, even her suffering became commodified in the economy of survival. This primitive accumulation not just of wealth, but of bodies. In the early chapters, Moll learns a crucial lesson. In a world organized by capital, marriage is not love, it is a strategy. She is courted, seduced, abandoned, and misled. She enters marriages for stability, then fakes her own fortune to bait wealthier men. She becomes, in effect, an entrepreneur of intimacy. As Marx, write, as Marx writes, the family in bourgeois society became not a unit of affection, but a unit of economic reproduction. In Capital, he notes that under bourgeois logic, even emotional relations become relations of property. For women like Moll, the body becomes a negotiable asset, the only asset available. Each marriage is a transaction, each seduction an investment, each pregnancy a liability or leverage. She is not immoral, she is rational. This is one of Defoe's most subtle critiques, that what Moll does mirrors the logic of the market. It is not that she mimics capitalism, she lives it more honestly than the men who exploit her. And when her husband turns out to be her half brother, when the structure of marriage collapses into incest, it is not just shock, it is allegory. Even the most sacred institutions have become tools of capital. When all else fail, when men abandon her, when husbands die, when promises rot, Moll becomes a thief. But even here, Defoe is deliberate. She is not erratic or violent. Her theft is structured, systematic, and planned. She studies the marketplace. She times her movements. She disguises herself. She targets the wealthy. She evades detection. In other words, she becomes a professional. Her theft becomes labor in the Marxist sense, alienated, commodified, and necessary for survival. It is not just that she steals, it is that stealing becomes her job. This raises a fundamental question. What is the difference between labor and crime if both are performed under coercion? If a woman must steal to eat or marry to survive, is she a deviant or merely a displaced laborer, denied the means of legitimate employment? Marx reminds us that capitalism criminalizes those whom it first excludes. Moll is excluded from property, inheritance, and guilds. So she creates an alternative economy, one built on deception and agility, on the subversive intelligence of the excluded. She is not punished for threatening the system. She is punished for revealing its contradictions. Eventually, Moll is caught. She is imprisoned in Newgate, awaiting execution. Her body, once a commodity for seduction and theft, is now to be made spectacle of punishment. And here, Marx's critique of ideology returns. Moll confesses, she repents, she performs morality, but her repentance is not spiritual, it is strategic. She learns to manipulate the new market, the market of grace, mercy, and rehabilitation. In this system, redemption itself is a commodity. The spectacle of punishment, what Foucault would later call the theatre of sovereign power, is used to legitimate the very system that created her crime. She does not die, she is transported to Virginia, to the colonies, where she becomes a landowner. The irony is brutal. The same empire that criminalized her propertylessness now grants her wealth. On stolen land in a settler colony, she has not been redeemed, she has changed platforms. What began as economic survival in the streets of London ends in a settler accumulation across the Atlantic. The cycle of capital continues, and Moll, once the criminalized body, is now the manager of other bodies. What then is Moll Flanders in Marxist terms? It is not a novel about sin, nor merely about crime. It is a diagnosis of historical capitalism. It shows us how poverty is not accidental, but produced. Women's body becomes the first sites of labor extraction. Marriage and theft both serve as proxies for wage labor. The state criminalizes precisely those it displaces. Punishment becomes theater, redemption becomes capital, and crime becomes labor in its most naked form. Moll is a composite figure, the wageless mother, the seductress, the thief, the entrepreneur, the penal subject, the colonist. She is not just one woman, she is the human face of primitive accumulation. To call her a criminal is to obscure what she reveals, that capitalism itself is built on theft of land, of labor, of bodies. So, what becomes of Moll in the modern world? She is still here. She is the single mother navigating welfare bureaucracy, the migrant worker crossing borders without documentation, the sex worker policed by laws that claim to protect her, the incarcerated woman whose poverty is recorded as violence. We continue to punish survival, we continue to criminalize economic precarity, and we continue to gender it. Moll Flanders is not an artifact, she is a mirror, and through Marx we understand her not as a cautionary tale but as an ideological expose. In punishing her, the state punishes the reality it does not wish to name, that survival under capitalism is itself a kind of crime, and that those who expose this truth, most often women, must be made examples of, not to protect the public but to preserve the illusion of justice. Moll Flanders was born in a prison, but she did not stay there. She moved through the cracks of a civilization that calls itself moral but acted with mercantile precision. She seduced it, outwitted it, stole from it, and in the end she joined it. That is not a happy ending, that is the logic of capital. Absorb what cannot be destroyed and leaves us with a question. Was Moll truly a criminal or simply one of the earliest casualties of an economic system that punished survival when it didn't fit the mold of property, patriarchy, and propriety? Do answer in the comments. Until next time, this is the criminal imagination. Behind every crime, ask not only who broke the law but who wrote it and who it was written to exclude.